everyone. My name is Rupam Bhattacharya, and I am a product manager at SAP, focusing on digital experience services in SAP Business Technology Platform. And one such service within Business Technology Platform for digital experience is known as SAP LaunchPad service, which enables organizations to build a cloud-based central point of access to business applications and common services from various sources like SAP S/4HANA, custom build apps on BTP or otherwise, and also third-party applications and extensions, irrespective of whether they are from cloud or on-premise. Key motivation is to increase productivity and efficiency of business users by quickly and easily accessing relevant apps, reports, tasks, and notifications from a centralized and an intuitive user experience. It enables such simplified access with a role-based personalized LaunchPad site, which can be accessed from anywhere, anytime. The hands-on material is available in the GitHub page. You can find the link in the TechEd session catalog, and you can already follow along while we do the exercise. So in this hands-on session, we will start from subscribing. Let me scroll. Yeah. We will start with subscribing to the SAP Launchpad service, create a business site, see a demo how we can consume the federated content from SAP S/4HANA on-premise system, create a custom application to access it via the business site, and how we can access the business site itself from SAP Start mobile app. So we have a packed agenda for this session, and I would encourage you to follow along with the exercises using your own SAP BTP sub-account. If you have an existing sub-account, even if it is free tier or trial account, you may want to check with the entitlement for Business Application Studio and LaunchPad service. And then you're good to go for this hands-on session. If you don't have a sub-account to perform these exercises, and you would like to do the exercises during this session, I would recommend that you create a trial account right away. If you already have a SAP user, creation of trial account usually takes about 10 minutes. If you're looking for the URL on how to create a BTP trial account, please look into the page for exercise 0, which you can also find in if you search for it in the internet. Usually a BTP trial account has Business Application Studio subscription already created and an entitlement to LaunchPad set. So in any case, you may also choose to do the hands-on exercise later and observe as I do the hands-on exercise live here. Okay, after a brief introduction to the session, I would like to spend a few minutes explaining the product renaming, which you might have already heard in the opening keynote today. This is also the reason why the session title is a beginning to end workshop on configuring SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition. Let me explain. SAP announced today about a portfolio of products called SAP Build, consisting of SAP Build Apps, SAP Build Process Automation, and SAP Build Work Zone. In a nutshell, SAP Build enables you to create and augment enterprise apps, automate processes, and design business sites all visually. SAP Build Work Zone is the part within SAP Build that helps improve productivity by seamless digital experience. SAP Build Work Zone comes in 2 editions, Standard and Advanced, each renamed from what is already available today as Standard BTP Digital Experience Services to be available as 2 editions of the same product name, SAP Build Work Zone. SAP Launchpad service would be renamed to SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition. This is a topic of focus in this session. The other existing digital experience service, which was known as SAP Work Zone prior to SAP TechEd, would be called SAP Build Work Zone Advanced Edition. But they remain inherently the same products as they have them today in BTP. Hence, the renaming does not incur additional effort of any sort like learning, migration, etc. Moreover, what we learned today in this session remains relevant post the renaming as well. Although the change of name of SAP LaunchPad Service is announced today, please note that the new names, SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition, would reflect in technical product UIs, BTP cockpit, and documentation as of January 2023. Now we have many sessions lined up in TechEd today and tomorrow, which will take you through the SAP Build and also SAP Build Work Zone. If you are interested in learning more about it, I encourage you to go through them. And the general overview of SAP Build Work Zone link that is here in this GitHub page, and attend other TechEd session to go in depth, get an in-depth overview. One such session is AD200, which talks about SAP's strategy and roadmap for SAP Work Zone services. Of course, we have exciting innovations lined up for SAP Build Work Zone, adding it to its rich set of capabilities, which will be announced in coming months. You may learn more about such upcoming innovations and product improvements in the Roadmap Explorer, which you will find the link to it here. But our focus for this hands-on session is to learn the technical details of how we utilize SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition to create business site, configure it, and surface business apps from different sources. So given that we have a lot to cover, I guess it's time to get started with our exercise. But before I do so, let me inform you that my colleagues and product managers from the same team, Iris, Florian, and Thomas, are available to answer your questions during the session while the hands-on is in progress via the Q&A tool. So let's dive into exercise 0. So at first, we will set up the LaunchPad site. And for that, we will go into my trial account. This is my trial account. And if you see my instances and subscriptions, you would see that I do not have LaunchPad yet subscribed. So let me head to the service marketplace. And we will start with accessing the service. Now here I can create an instance for it. So I have selected to create, and the plan I will select is a subscription. This should do for now. And once we create, it will try and add this subscription in my instance and subscriptions tab. And we have to wait a little while for this to go on. So once this is done, we should be able to launch the LaunchPad service. As we wait, okay, this is done. And what we need to understand is once this service is created and subscribed, a few role collections are automatically generated and added. Let's search for them. So these are the different roles that are added, which allows you to access the LaunchPad as an admin or an end user, or even can access the advanced theming. So I will go ahead and assign these roles to my user, and you should also do that for your user in the hands-on, so that you're able to access the LaunchPad site. So now I'll go back to the instance and subscriptions now that I have done, and I will launch this. This should load up the LaunchPad service site manager. Now, site managers is where you will have a site directory with all the sites that you create. You will have the content manager where you can explore different content from different systems and add them to your content, or which is my content area, which can then be surfaced into the LaunchPad sites. You can also add content channels. We will see that when we do federation, and some settings about the sites, about the LaunchPad sites overall. Right now, we will head back and create a site. So here's the site, and I would create a site with a name as mentioned in the session hand material as well, Job Core. And now that this is done, the edit screen comes up, and we are ready to start creation of this site. Now, at this point of time, I would like to pause and encourage you to go ahead and do the exercise 0, which is about getting your trial account, getting your subscription, and assigning the roles to your user, and then also going into the site and navigating uh, into the site directory. So once you're done, we will get started with exercise 1.1. I will give you 5 minutes to get ahead with this. Okay, so I will once again touch upon how the role assignment is done. So you need to come here. You can see the roles that are already generated once you subscribe to LaunchPad service through this role collection. But one easy way to assign your user the given roles is to go to the user, select your user, and assign role collection. And here you will see the roles that are not yet assigned, and you can select LaunchPad admin for you to be able to access the site directory. Since I've already assigned it, it doesn't show up here. But if you did not assign LaunchPad admin, it will show up later. And if you can also check whether it is already assigned by searching here. So these are the roles that are currently assigned to me in this particular instance. And once you are assigned with these roles, especially the LaunchPad admin role, you should be able to access the site directory and have an ability to go through all the panels here, site directory, content manager, channel manager, and also create sites using this create site button. All right. I will get started now with the next session, which is the exercise 1. You can click at the end of exercise 0. There's a link that takes you to exercise 1. And here what we will do is what we've already done a little bit, which is basically creating the site. You can name anything. Here is called job core, but it's not necessarily job core, has to be. And we will look into the site settings somewhat later during the demo. And then let's move to exercise 1.2, where I'm going to add now an custom app tile onto the site. Now, why am I doing this? Because right now the site is empty. I've just created a site. It doesn't have any site to access. So I will add a site. And this is a demo application. Many of you might have seen this in the demo kit. It's a Fury application hosted, and we will create a site item, an app through this. So let's just create in my content. I will create a new app. Right, and I will add a title, which could be, say, new orders. Again, it's up to you. And select in place so that the application doesn't open in another tab, but already inside the LaunchPad, you keep inside. I'm not going to connect to any system as such, so it'll be a URL app, but later we'll probably explore the other options. In the URL, you paste this particular URL of the site, how it can be accessed. I've just copied it from another window and then pasted it here. In the navigation place, you need to assign a semantic object and action. Now, semantic objects and actions are logical ways in which SAP Launchpad service identifies the application endpoint and allows you to do in-app navigation from one app to another using this semantic object action. For example, it could be something like sales order display, manage, create, things like that. So here we will probably call it order, and the action could be display. Right, and I do not want to add any parameters at this point in time, but you can actually add parameters if you wish to, which gets passed to the application at the start. In the visualization, you decide how the tile looks inside the LaunchPad. So the title is already selected based on our initial properties given, but you can already give a subtitle, something like shopping cart, and some information like, I don't know, order now. And an icon, you can select an icon that appears in the tile as well, which could be my sales order. And that's the icon that comes. This is exactly how you can visualize how it can happen in the, it will show up in the site in itself when you launch it. So first thing is to save it. Once you've created this application or an app that is a URL app that launches another application within, we need to do a couple of things. First of all, the site should have access to it, right? And users should have access to this site. So what can we do to get the access for the site is the everyone role, which is assigned to almost or to all users here. I will assign this app inside that. So first thing is that to add this new orders app, which we just created into the everyone role. That way everyone has access to it. Ideally, it would probably be restricted via some other role collection, but for simplicity, we'll just add it to everyone. And next is at what group should it show inside the LaunchPad site. So it's usually clubbed in spaces and pages or in groups. So here we'll follow the group concept. So hence I'll create a group and I will call it, say, purchasing. And here I will assign this app to it. So the app will stick within the purchasing group as we launch it. Let's see if you've done everything or if this works. So let's just launch the site. That's the button to launch the site. And now the LaunchPad application is available here. You can see that this the tile that we just created is already showing up here. And if you click into it, you can already go into the application, which is TechEd as a normal demo kit application, and get here in this particular application here. Now, this is good, but it's still showing an older theme or rather a different theme. So we have the latest theme available. So let me switch over to the theme here. If you go to the settings, you can get to this appearances and get into the morning horizon or horizon theme, which is the latest. And this is how the application, the site directory looks. So having done this, this calls for end of exercise 1. And I would again encourage you to follow along, do this exercise. I will give 5 minutes of break again. I hope you're able to do the exercises, especially exercise 1 by now. If you do not, or rather if you're delayed because of unavailability of sub-account and you have time to create your own trial account, fret not, we will show some demo next, which is going to be a demo scenario, which is not going to be hands-on. So while you do this, you should be able to catch up on the exercise. And before we start exercise 2, hopefully all are at par with the exercises that we're doing all together. And anyway, this is a recorded session, which will be available in a couple of weeks from today. And you can always follow along later. Okay, so I will get started with the next set of session. Now, before we go on to exercise 2, I will try and show some content federation where we will bring applications from other system, SAP system, SAP S/4HANA on-premise system, into the LaunchPad site. And there are 2 ways in which you can bring such content. And one of the ways manual integration, like we did the manual creation of the tile, the app tile for the other URL. You can also create such manual integration of tiles into the LaunchPad site from other sources like SAP system or S/4HANA, both cloud or on-premise, or SuccessFactors and various other systems. And there are different application templates available from which you can consume and expose. But this could be time consuming unless you are trying to do pick and choose the specific applications and roles and groups that you want to expose. There are easier ways to expose content in bulk, which is called content federation. Now, for advanced integration of business content, what can this particular option is really useful, where the content structure and the whole um, content from existing Fiori contents like in front-end server, Fiori front-end server for SAP S/4HANA can be brought in into your SAP BTP Launchpad service or SAP Work Zone, Build Work Zone Standard Edition, as it's called now, and then consume that and assign those content to the users to access. So this is where the central point of access comes into picture, right? And there are plenty of integrations right now. This is the integration status at this point of time. You can integrate against SAP S/4HANA, Cloud, or On-Premise. You can integrate HTML5 apps from the Cloud Foundry of the same BTP instance, or SAP Business Suite, SAP Integration, Integrated Business Planning, and so on and so forth. But having said that, what are the steps for content federation? Now, content federation from SAP S/4HANA on-premise requires activities, and like 3 activities basically expose the content. Now, first activity is that you have to expose the content from S/4HANA and make the system ready for it. Configuration of SAP Cloud Connector, which in turn acts as a secure tunnel between Business Technology Platform and SAP S/4HANA on-premise. And finally, configuring the exposing system as content provider in SAP Launchpad service and assigning these content to respective users controlled via role assignments. Now let us first look at S/4HANA setup. First of all SAP S/4HANA system needs to be set up for content exposure for it to be able to give content to BTP Launchpad service. So before we select the content exposure via CDM service, it is important for us to understand the mechanism on how federated content is embedded in SAP Launchpad service. The Fiori apps from SAP S/4HANA system or any such apps from a content provider is embedded within the business site as a iframes. Hence, to ensure secured access only from target BTP environment and establish a secured click-jacking protection, in spite of exposing content beyond same origin domain, certain one-time setup is needed, which is usually done by an S/4HANA administrators. This includes managing HTTP allow list to consider access from BTP as expected exposure target and activating the click-jacking framing protection in Unified Connectivity Framework, also known as UCON framework, or basically accessed via the transaction code UCON cockpit. Once this is done, another one-time admin activity is to map the system aliases. In case SAP front-end server is running in an embedded deployment within SAP S/4HANA, we need to declare or clear the system alias so that we can access the content directly. In case the front-end server is running in hub deployment model, individual backend aliases would have to be mapped via destinations individually. Now, these are system configuration that is already done for our system that we will see the demo for. So to learn the steps mentioned just now, refer to SAP S/4HANA administration guide. And also there are tutorials on how to prepare S/4HANA system for content federation available in developer.sap.com. Once this part is done, we will see what is the rest of the things done at SAP S/4HANA system. So let me log into the SAP S/4HANA system. The first thing I want to do is get to this ICF and check if the corresponding CDM3 service is already enabled. Now, this is the mechanism by which the content is exposed to the consuming system, like a target SAP Launchpad service. And if you see this path, we will actually see the same way how we would consume that again inside the right. So coming back. Now, the other thing that we have to do that once the CDM3 service is active is to go to UI2 CDM3 exposure scope and basically load and expose the specific roles that we want to show. Now, we do not probably want to expose all roles at once, and we can choose which are the roles we are selecting. So if you want to expose all roles, that's the radio button to use. But if you want to select specific roles, you can select this, and I'll show you what is already configured in our system. these are the different roles that are already configured for exposure from this particular S4HANA on-premise system. So now that this is already done, we will see how the rest of the exposure really goes through. The first thing we would do is, now that SAP S4HANA system is ready for exposure, we would need to configure SAP Cloud Connector, which is basically a secure tunnel between for accessing content from SAP on-premise systems into BTP cloud system. So I will go into the Cloud Connector now, and let me refresh because I haven't logged in for some time. It might really time out. So, and now I'll log in. And so once you get into Cloud Connector, we have to now establish a trust with the cloud to the on-premise system. And this Cloud Connector is already part of the, already connects to the, or rather has the configuration for connecting to the on-premise system. What we have to do is to create a new sub-account, which will be accessing this via the Cloud Connector. So we'll go into creating a new sub-account. And in this point of time, we would need, we would need the details of the sub-account itself. So what are the important details that we need to know is, one is the sub-account ID and the region from where the sub-account is being created. So let's go back, let's go back here. And the region is US East, VA, and it's an AWS. And the sub-account is the value we connected. And obviously check for spaces. And what should be the display name? I would say TechEd hands-on. The sub-account user is me, and in your case, it would be probably be you, or ideally it would be set with some service account, but and then you can give some location ID to expose specific of the in a specific contained way. So this is the location ID I chose, TechEd. And this is going to create this new sub account. This is created here. You can see SAP hands-on. And next job is to go into this and create a cloud to on-premise connection. So we have just added the sub account, but we have to say what is the exposure mechanism. So what is the backend type system? It is type web app system because it's SAP S4HANA on-premise. The protocol has to be HTTPS. The internal host is something that I have already, and I will use from the S4 system. I'm just going to get a copy of that so that I can paste it here. Right, and the port would be 44300. Right, and next you have to assign a virtual host, which will be easy to access. So I'll put it as TechEd and 4432300. And in the principal type, I would say none. We will use basic authentication then. And we will use host from the request header. So we will use the virtual host name. And next, we'll check internal host once this is done. So this is being done and it says reachable. And the last part is to basically assign the resources that can be accessed. So obviously, we want to access all of the resources that are exposed. So you want to say the URL path is slash and everything that is from slash and ahead, all subpaths. Good. Having done this, we are done with creation of successfully assigning the exposed content and assigning the BTP instance in SAP Cloud Connector, creating this successful tunnel. Now, how can we confirm this? We can go here and check the cloud connectors that are connected right now. And here you can see that this has been connected. And you can see TechEd 44300 is the host, and this is how it has been already been shown. Now, what is the next step? The next step is to configure the site to access the thing. But before that, I need to set up destinations, which will be used both for design time access of content. So collecting all the CDM3 exposed content from this for HANA system. We'll use the design time, and the runtime is where it will be using to get the actual application when the application is loaded from the tiles. So let us just create a new destination. I will call it S4HANA DT for design time, and the type is HTTP. And the URL that I need to do is my URL. I have a template. Now this is the same as what we exposed in the CDM 3 entities. So it's basically has the same path we saw before, and we did not create it under we created it under TechEd, not under S4HANA name. So that's how it is. And this is the thing. The proxy type is going to be on-premise because we're going to go and talk to on-premise system via the cloud connector. And we will give my authentication here. Location ID was TechEd. We inserted that. It has already taken the password. I don't know, but I will anyway assign that. And obviously I have to assign some additional properties like SAP client in this case. Now, having said that, no. And we can check the connection. It says its connection is reachable. We have to now assign a runtime connection as well. So we'll clone this and call it SAP S4HANA RT, which is again type RT. This URL now is no more the CDM exposure service, which basically gives the metadata of what is exposed, but rather the backend directly. The proxy type will be on-premise. Everything else remains same. Let me provide the password, and we need certain other properties here. Something like SAP SysID, which is going to be S4H for S4HANA. Then we have HTML5 dynamic destination set to true. And we have SAP platform. Obviously, these are not part of the dropdown. You have to type it in. Is type ABAP. And you have SAP service, which is 3200 in this case. All right, I think we are done with the setup of the runtime as well. And check connection. It says it is reachable. Having done this, we should be now able to add this as a content provider in our site. So let's go there. And here's the channel manager where you have content channels. At this point of time, there's no other channel but the HTML5 apps within this BDP instance. But now I'll create a new channel and call it S4HANA and connect via cloud connector. I mean, it doesn't really matter much. And the design time destination. Okay, now this is not showing yet. So it is not picking the design time destination. What I will do is sign out and sign in. This is the fastest way to get that. Give me a second, because it is not refreshing the the destinations that we created already. So let's go back and see if I can now see. Let me check. Yes, now it's designed. So I will again do that S4 HANA, and the design time destination would be design time, DT, runtime destination will be RT. If we leave this, and we will like to include the groups and catalog assignments to the roles already fetched together and assign accordingly. So we will create them already, and under the hood, it's creating this content channel, and see the content channel is created. What has this created? Let us understand. So if we go to the Content Explorer and to S4HANA, we see that the 4 roles that were exposed in S4HANA are currently available here. Now, first thing I would do is add it to my content so that this can be added into the site. The next thing is, because these roles are added, I would also need to add them to my site. So I'll go ahead and add the corresponding roles here to the site. Now, again, you can pick and choose the site roles that you want to access, maybe as as for SAP S/4HANA system exposes quite a number of roles, but in your case, this particular LaunchPad sites need a subset of it, so you can pick and choose the right ones that you need and assign accordingly. Having created this, it is still not possible to see this in the user because user hasn't got these roles. Again, these are the roles which has access control to all the application within this role assignments, and hence you have to assign these roles to individual users in BTP. So again, we go back to the user and go to this, and we will now see if these roles appear here. And you can see that they are appearing with the format of the content channel underscore the entire role name. And for demo purposes, I'll assign all of them to my user. And there you go. It's already assigned. Now the next job is to go and check if this has been created. So we go in and voila. So we see all the roles and the corresponding groups and assigned content within. Now, if you really see, all the application tiles are showing up coming from these roles. There are different groups that has come in, quite a number of them, I guess. Now, if you remember, we created a group called purchasing where you can still see our old application tile that we created before, but there are other tiles which are there. So maybe just, maybe I'll search for supplier and display the supplier list. Let's just go to this application. And here, let's see if it can, because the runtime, design time is working, we saw the tiles, but now we see the runtime is also working where the application shows up inside thing and we can obviously work with it. So this is how SAP S/4HANA content has been consumed inside BTP Launchpad service using the content federation model. Again, there are a lot of content available, including a thorough tutorial of how to do this. When you have time with and have access to an SAP S/4HANA system, the corresponding cloud connector, and a BTP sub-account, you can give it a try on your own. But unfortunately, the time isn't sufficient, and we would have to move on with our corresponding exercises. So I hope I hope you've seen good example of how you can consume applications and content from existing SAP system or any other federating system. Here in this case, we saw it from SAP S/4HANA on-premise using the cloud connectors and accessing these application in SAP Launchpad. It's quite easy. And we also saw just now how to consume a tile that launches a dynamic URL or a URL tile, which is this one. But now let us see how you can consume applications that you develop on and deploy on your own BTP instance. And that's what our next exercise is all about, which is exercise number 2. Here, we will be using SAP Business Application Studio to develop this application first, and then we will deploy this. Once we deploy this, we will see how we can consume this inside SAP Launchpad Site. So the first topic is to go ahead and launch the Business Application Studio. So we're already starting with exercise 2. I hope that are aware of this. From here on, again, I would encourage others and everyone who is doing the hands-on to continue doing along. And I will obviously give after every exercise, I will give some pause for you to catch up and finish the exercise parts. So right now we will go and try to create the applications. For that, we need to launch SAP Business Application Studio. Right. So I already have a dev space created some time back, but let us see. Let's say you do not have a dev space created. So let me try from that perspective. So I create a dev space, and for us to create an application, which is a simple SAP Fiori application, you would probably start from creating a new dev space of type SAP Fiori. I will call it TechEd demo or something like that, or TechEd workspace. I don't know, whichever is your chosen one, and create the dev space. This takes a while. This takes a while to start. Okay. So it says I can only run the other one when I close this. I'll stop the other one and create it so that you see how it is to start from a empty workspace. If I would have used the other one, there would have been certain steps which are already done previously. Like I've been creating applications in my dev space where you would, so it's starting now, but yeah, I would have already had the deployment already set up to the corresponding BTP account and so on and so forth. So I would want to show the demo using a fresh workspace where nothing is set up, so which is something similar to what you have, unless you have already worked on Business Application Studio and build applications, then perhaps this um, example is quite easy for you. So while this is starting, let me quickly recap what we are going to do. We will go ahead. So if you're starting from a fresh Business Application Studio, and you should have to say accept the terms and go ahead and create a dev space. Once you've created a dev space, like work zone content and whatever use of, which is the default SAP Fiori, create a dev space. Once you've created it, will wait for it to start. Once it is running, we will continue. So you can also start in parallel at this point of time. So I will wait for this. But I want to recap what we're doing here. So we saw in the beginning how to create an application tile for a URL application, which we embedded inside the tile, which launches within SAP Work Zone in an iframe model. We also saw how we can consume applications from other SAP solutions, especially SAP S/4HANA. And this time we saw it from SAP HANA on-premise using cloud connectors. And now we are going to create an application deployed to this BTP instance and consume that. So there are different application types that we are trying to show in consumption. Once the workspace is created, you can get into it. This is what you would probably see in the beginning. And we will keep the application really simple. That's not the focus of this session. Our focus is to create any application and then seeing how to consume that. So we'll start from a template. And let me see if this is tutorial 2.1 finishes here. Okay. I will go ahead and do exercise 2.2 and then take a break for others to catch along. So let me hold your attention for actually creating the application. And once I'm done with creating, or rather, it takes a little while. So up to then I'll get a break for us to do your work exercises on your own systems. So we will select SAP Fiori application. We will say start. And here we don't want to start with SAP Fiori elements, although it's a very good way to create SAP Fiori applications. Here we're going to do a very simple empty application with just the title on header. So that should be our intention. And now we say go next. Once we are here, because we're not going to connect to any backend system from this application, we don't want to create a data source, and hence I select none. Obviously for simplicity. Again, the view name is suggested, which is basically a view inside your UI5 application. If you're familiar with UI5 development model, I don't want to change that. The default name is fine for me. And here comes the question of what is your module name? Now the module name here apparently is Hello World as per the document. So I would keep it that way. Application title should be Hello World. You can choose whatever you like. Application namespace, I can say TechEd. The description can be left as it is. This is going to be the standard project folder. No need to change this. And the minimum UI5 version is also fine. But important thing is to add the deployment configurator. Why? Because UI5 application in itself needs to be deployed into BTP app repo by encompassing that inside an MTA project, or an MTAR, basically a deployable artifact for Cloud Foundry. And when you select this, the MTA descriptors will be automatically generated for you, so you don't have to really build that part of it. And I also want to add the FLP configuration. Now, what is this? This is basically the attributes that will decide how the tile looks when it is automatically generated. Once you deploy this, it will go into the HTML5 repo. The managed app router will pick this up, create the corresponding routes, and the site manager, once you include that into your site, will create the tile automatically based on the information that you provide in this FLP configuration, which is basically creating some parts of the manifest in the application. But right now, we don't have to go into the details of code. Actually, you can do everything without having to do any code. So next, we select the target. We will deploy this to Cloud Foundry, not to a SAP backend system like a BAP system. So we select Cloud Foundry here. Again, we are not going to access services, and we do not need access to any destination at this point of time, but we would want the manage application router to add this application automatically. And hence we keep this selection to yes. So if there were other destinations, which basically brings in data from backend, you would have to select this here, and that's how you would create an application. But here for simplicity, we are not going to access any backend data. So we just go on to next. Now that you see here, the LaunchPad configuration is asking what would be the semantic object. If you remember the exercise 1 in there, when we created the tile, it was asking us to create the semantic object because that's the logical naming of the application within SAP LaunchPad service. That's how it decides that semantic object hyphen action is the logical combination to access the application. And hence you need to assign this. So I don't know, and semantic object is what's in the demo, but I can only, let me just check what is in this. Just to be similar to what we have. Yeah, hello world and display. Okay, that was rather simple. So we will call hello world, and the action would be display because it's not going to do anything but just display an empty application. And what would be the title? I would say my hello world app. This will come up in the top of the title of the tile, and the subtitle is freestyle Fury app. That's it. This should be how the Launchpad tile definition would be. And once I create finish, it will start creating the project. And you can see under the bottom, there's installing the dependencies. And once this is done, it will allow me to see the folder and go ahead. I would take a pause here, and I would encourage you to do this. We take a kind of a pause for 5 minutes. Once you are back, and obviously by the time I hopefully this is also finished, the project creation in my case, we will be able to show the next steps. So why don't you take this opportunity to continue and come up to the stage from the exercises. So we have done exercise 2.1, exercise, let's just show you that. We have done exercise 2.1, which was up to the part of creating the workspace. Then exercise 2.2 started from here. We started from a template. We created an application from a template. We added all the information that's available here to create the application, and then we are starting to generate the application, right? And we are waiting for this to happen. This takes a bit of time, so we can wait. Okay, in my case, it is already there. But I will wait for another 4 or 5 minutes. By the way, if you're already noticing this, I'll click on this open folder, because if you get also to the stage, you can already go in and review the content of the folder. But I will wait for 4 minutes. I probably can talk something about what's generated here, but take your time to finish your exercise up to 2.2. Okay, so while you're still doing the exercise, let me reiterate. We have the federation information available here. If you go to this and to intro, you have all the federation information available here. And also, if you want to see how you can add apps ad hoc. So let me just show you here in the site directory. So let's go in, and if I were to go here, you can create a new app from here. And here you have an option to create a new app by giving a title. And then if there's an URL app, you can paste the URL here because you're not using any system. So there are only few options available for no system-based access, like URL native iOS application and Android. Again, the native iOS and Android applications are available for us to navigate into specific apps within when the work zone, so when the business site is inside SAP in a mobile environment, whereas the application URL application title can always show up inside the tile, which loads the application that is pointed by the URL. You could pass parameters to it. Let us consider, I mean, I'll take a random destination because then we can see more options here. Then you can add different things like you can have an dynamic URL. You can create manually a dynamic URL application here or an SAP UI5 application from loaded by the system connected through the destination here, the BDB destination that you select here. Or you can also embed a SAP GUI for HTML, WebDriven Pro app, or Web Client UI. So you can use one of these information and add them here. So if, depending on what you select, like if you select SAP UI5, you have to select the corresponding component name and so on and so forth. And this is how you could go ahead and build those things, create those apps, and then assign that to a role to the corresponding users who would need to access this application. Obviously, semantic object and action is mandatory. So, and visualization, you can always give more information around this, like subtitle, etc. Something that I want to also touch upon is that you have option to add dynamic app launchers or static app launchers. What you've seen so far is static app launchers. We go back here, but you also saw dynamic app launchers, which are something like this, which has information additionally fetched from a web service, which also shows up inside the card. So let's see how does it look. If you were to show something like that, you would create a dynamic app launcher, and then you have to select a corresponding destination, and then the service URL that returns this information that you want to show here. And you see this 0 right now because there is simply no service connected to it. But if there was a service connected to it and a corresponding service URL based on the user's authorization, this will get called and you'll see the corresponding data shown up here. There's also an option to have refresh interval, which can be like you can already get the information fetched at a regular interval, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, as and when you would want to keep updating. This is quite useful to create some sort of a dashboard-like layout and tiles that have more information without having to navigate inside the application. All right. Having said that, as a side note, please note that this is not part of the hands-on. So I will go back to the hands-on portion, which is the next step of creating the application. Once we have created the application, we loaded the application here. So I hope everybody is at this stage now. If you're not, it's not a problem. You can always follow this along later. But right now, if we're good to focus here, that what exactly is generated and how do you deploy this? The first thing is it generates an application or a project where it has an MTA YAML, which is generated because we selected the deployment descriptor, and it has the web app portion, which is basically the UI5 application contained within. And if you really look into the view, it generated something very empty. And this again, you can obviously open this in a layout editor, which is again an easy drag and drop model of creating this layout. But I just want to show you what you can see. And if you want, you can actually add this as well, add something additional to it so that you understand that what we deploy is the application. What you see in the LaunchPad site is the application we deployed, because it's going to be an empty page otherwise. Let's see the loading of the layout editor. Again, I'm sidestepping from the training, the exercise. You do not have to do this step of adding any content here, but if you were to, I'm just going to show it to anyway. So let us say we would add a VBox as a layout, because this is a layout. We'll add a VBox. Another way is to go into the outline and see it like this and add something like a title here. Yeah, title. And I would say the title text is my freestyle custom Fury app is here. at least we can then see this in the title. And the level, I would say it's an H1, so that it looks big. Title size is H1, visible true. Width, I want to be center aligned as well. So I put it 100%. Text alignment to center it, and that's it. I'm not much fancy, so that when we deploy it, we can see it. And now that is automatically saved, that's the feature within Business Application Studio. What you can do is, first of all, test this application locally. So you will right click on this and you can say preview application. This will launch the different scripts possible. So I will start launching this inside the sandbox URL. Now, once the app is launched, you should see this happening. If this doesn't happen, it is probably because your browser is blocking a pop-up. You can always click on the top one, and here's the application. This is how the application launches inside a sandbox Fury Launchpad. This is not really inside the Launchpad yet, in the Launchpad service yet, where we will add. And you can see this is a standard Launchpad's a sandbox environment, which shows how it would look if you were to deploy it. But nevertheless, if it does not start, you can always go back here and launch it again or enable the pop-up. So this is not really important. You don't have to see this launched. Just a second. But having said that, the next step would be to deploy it. And that's exactly where the MTA YAML comes handy. You just have to right click and build the MTA project. This will now package this application inside an MTAR artifact, which will appear here as an MTAR archive. So you can always look at this generated tools. Here you go. Archive is created. You can also see that this is done, completed. The archive is created. I will right click on this and deploy the MTA archive. This is how the application is now getting deployed into BTP. But we haven't told where to deploy yet. So it's trying to deploy it to the Cloud Foundry endpoint, but this is not really the endpoint, I believe. So let me just quickly check. How? You need to go here. Okay, I was logged out, so I need to log back in. Let it load. Right, we go here, and you should be able to see the API endpoint here. Okay, this is a different one because trials often nowadays come with this kind of API endpoint. It's good to check there before we start the deployment. And now we will change the API endpoint to this, and the credentials, obviously you have to provide the credentials of the user based on which this application will be submitted. I'll use the basic credentials here. Right, and I will sign in. Okay, that's weird. All right, let me try again. Okay. Did I do any mistakes somewhere here? API. There seems to be a space. Okay, no problem. And now you have to select the corresponding Cloud Foundry target and the space. Now, obviously, I might have more accounts there. So this is the Cloud Foundry target, ATIF, and the trial. So we'll just add that here, the corresponding organization, which is this. This is my trial account where I want to show this application or deploy this application. This is the space. Obviously, the space name will be picked from the spaces that is already there. You've defined inside your ADB, which is also comes along when you create the trial account. All right, having said that, if I were to apply this, this should start the deployment. So the deployment has started, as you can see. Sometimes it might actually not give you this, but it will error out here. It is possible. So you will try again, and the corresponding information would be asked from you. And so fret not, you can try a couple of times. If this step, you miss out this step and then the deployment fails, that's also okay. All right, while it deploys, what it's doing is it takes the MTAR archive, uses Cloud Foundry commands, CLI commands, and deploys it into the applications tab. And let's just see while it deploys if it is already shows up here. So you can always go into your account and see this is already coming in, but we're not sure if all the corresponding services and destination services, etc., because there's a lot of whole gamut of things that comes along with this application deployment. So yeah, now that is done, you can see process finished. It says that deployment is done. Obviously, it's managed app router, so you don't have to create any app router or anything. This is already available, and once you click on it, the application should load up, seeing the same thing what you saw in the local uh, test environment. And this should load the application. There you go, the application loads. But again, um, this is not the way we want to access. We want to access this within LaunchPad. I'm going to consume that inside the LaunchPad service. That, I believe, is the next exercise. If so, I would rather stop here and yes, we'll rather stop here and give you a time, like 5 minutes again, to catch up to exercise end of exercise 2.3. And we can then get started with exercise 2.4 of adding this application into the LaunchPad site from here on. In any case, as I'm sitting around, let me reiterate what we did. We went into Business Application Studio. We created a workspace of type SAP Fiori. Once we created the workspace of type SAP Fiori, we started creating an application with in template model. We selected SAP UI5 application, another freestyle UI5 application, an empty one, and we fill all the wizard, all the information that it asks before it creates the project, things like the module name, what kind of view name it would have, what is the deployment artifacts, as in how to name the deployment artifact, and what is your FLP content. And I want to show you while you do this also, I want to show you where exactly does this deployment artifact show up. If you go to manifest, you will see the semantic object and actions are mentioned here. Of course, you can add more information around that, like icons, etc., which was not really asked in the while generating it. But nevertheless, this is where it adds up, just in for your information. And this is the portion that SAP Launchpad service would read and create the corresponding tile and the information like title and subtitles from. And obviously, you can change that in this manifest directly on redeploy and consume the application as such. Okay, I think there's some question about how to see the layout preview. I think you get to see the layout when you go to a corresponding view, you right click on it and you say open with. And now that gives you two options, a text editor and a layout editor. If you select the text editor, obviously the corresponding XML editor would show up where you can actually code and change it, but layout editor is rather simpler. We can drag and drop items into the application. That's how we created the layout virtual box, a V box, a vertical box. And inside the items of this V box, we added a title. So at least you can see some title. And this is not necessary. You don't really have to do this. For our application to really work, it will anyway work without adding any item into the layout, but you'll still see the top hello world here. Obviously, you won't see this unless you add the corresponding title to it. Right. And again, when you have created the archive and you try to deploy it, you have to select first of all, you have to go into the MTA YAML. You have to build the archive. Once you build the archive, you will see the corresponding archive appearing under MTA archive. And once you do this, it'll ask you for several things to start with. One, which API endpoint and credential to be used to log into Cloud Foundry. Based on this, a dropdown would be created for how many systems you have in this API endpoint. If you have only one trial account, you'll probably see only one item, which is basically pointing to your trial account org name, which in my case was, which in my case was this. You see the subdomain or basically your org name, which is here. This was showing up. And once you select the corresponding org name, the spaces will show up. Now, this is the space that is only space available right now, which should be created automatically. If you do not have this in your sub account, if you do not have a space already, you might have to create this before you deploy, because the applications live in the context of spaces within the sub account. All right. One interesting thing that I wanted to show, in case you're not, you would still want some tools that are easier to deal with in terms of deployment, I would suggest you select the command palette from View. So you can start from this burger button, go to View, go to Command Palette, and here you can select many of the Fiori predefined commands. One of them is to open the application info. The application info is a rather simpler area to, which basically makes it easier to do certain things. For example, preview application, which you did here. When you right click on web app, you see preview application, but again, the application info houses all this most commonly used functions, and you can do this from here: preview application, deploy application, and things like that. Having said that, we have already deployed this, and I think you've had time to catch up. So we are going to continue with our exercise, and now we'll go into exercise 2.4, which is embedding the application in it. We already saw that the application is available inside the HTML5 applications. We already could run this directly. And now it's time to get this application in our content manager. So I will again. Now, first thing is that we have deployed it some new application into the content channel called HTML5 apps, which is nothing but points to the HTML5 repository of the same business technology platform sub-account. And hence it would appear somewhere here. But if you see, it doesn't. Why? Because I need to go into the corresponding channel and refresh the content through it. This is where the DT part of it comes into picture, where it refreshes all the deployed content and starts creating and showing them inside the LaunchPad site. Once this updating, so I already clicked on this refresh button, it was updating and now it's created. Now, if I were to go back into this, go to Content Explorer and now select HTML5 apps, you will see the corresponding app that I had already created and deployed. Now, this is not yet available in my content, but rather shows up in Content Explorer. You can pick and choose which content from the Content Explorer you want to deploy and show in the site. But in my case, obviously want to add this. So I'll add this to my content. You should see Hello World now showing in my content. And this was the namespace, this was the module name, and it's an HTML5 app which we created. Now, the app is available in my content. What are the next steps? First of all, we'll see the details about the app that was created, because we created something in Business Application Studio. We want to see how this whole thing came together. So all the title description that you gave in the wizard when you were creating the app shows up here, including the ID. ID is generated, the kind of system it is, the app router URL, and the component name, which was basically your namespace dot the module name, and the corresponding sub account where it is up deployed, and corresponding whether it is app router or not. Now, here the same semantic object and action is used, which is defined when we created the application. And this is already creating the corresponding navigation details, which I also showed in the manifest, by the way. That is what is picked up and created in the navigation. And the visualization, it comes again based on the title and subtitle we provided. In our case, if you remember, we did not provide any information. So this is empty. We did not provide any icon. This is also empty. But it says it supports all devices like desktop, tablet, and mobile. Obviously, in the next exercise, when we see the application running inside mobile, we should be able to see this application as well. Good. Having said that, there's another tab for translation where you can create and add the different translated text for different languages, which would then, depending on the browser language or actually the LaunchPad service language, resolved based on the browser language and the hierarchy of it, would then pick the corresponding title, etc., based on the language. Now, if this is what is generated as when you deploy the application and the information that you have provided in the application reside in Business Application Studio, basically the information that's part of the manifest of the application. But if you want to change that or show the tile in a different way, or maybe add something dynamic URL content to the same application, one option would be to create a local copy and then change things within that local copy, or add things within that local copy and add that local copy into it. So which basically starts from this auto-generated application title, but then you would see something more or different as the admin wishes to. All right, so where are we now? We have created and added this application to my content, but we haven't really made this available inside any group or as such. Neither have we told which kind of roles this application can be accessed from. So right now, no user can access this application, but just for brevity, I would simply add this to the everyone role, which means all users will be able to access this application. Now, that may not be the ideal case for all applications. For example, manager applications, you might have different roles created for specific manager, specific business functions, and then you will assign specific users to their corresponding roles as they require. But here I'm just adding it to the role, but you have to anyway add it to some role for it to really surface on one of the other users. The role, if you've added to the role, but we haven't added to the group, and as I told you before, SAP LaunchPad service structures everything as per groups, and you must add it to some group for it to appear under that group layout. So how can we do this? We already created one purchasing, but let's just show you again how to create a group. We can say the title of this group is Hello World itself, which is kind of strange group, but just for demo. And this group should house my application. I will now add this application to the Hello World group and save this. Now the whole resolution of authorization happens that if you have that role and that role has that application, all the groups that has that application will also show up. So you don't assign the groups to the role, but rather the applications directly. And here we are done. Let's just go ahead and refresh this page and see if we can see the application already. And this is the local runtime. My bad. This is signed out, so let's just log in again. Okay, and there you go. I see the Hello World group here, and I can also see the application My Hello World app, corresponding title and subtitle as we expect it to be. And this loads up the application. You should see the brig title on top, which we added just for us to differentiate the application. And this is running in place. As you can see, you already have the shell of the Fiori LaunchPad or rather SAP LaunchPad service. And you can obviously go back and navigate around back to the apps folder. Obviously, a more complex scenario might include where you have to call another application. Again, you can use something called intent-based navigation, which gets resolved by the LaunchPad service. So you say, basically, I want to navigate from this application to another application determined by a semantic object and action combination. And then the application to which you want to navigate is resolved by the LaunchPad service and loads the corresponding application that has been defined with that semantic object action combination. And there's another option in SAP LaunchPad service, which is basically sending across app content, or not app content, but rather data cross application when you're doing within app navigation. We call it. So this is also feasible, and this also remembers the state of the previous application as you come back. So there are different reasons, apart from the fact that it's central access. There are other many such features which allow you to utilize the benefits of LaunchPad, SAP LaunchPad service. All right, so having said that, we just finished exercise 2.4. We saw, again, a bit of a recap. We saw how we included the dynamic tile which is part of the purchasing, and this navigates to the standard URL from a demo kit. Then we created app federation, content federation from SAP S/4HANA on-premise. We took 4 roles from this particular system, exposed it via and through the SAP Cloud Connector, where we define which is the accessing sub-account, and then we allow this access from the sub-account in the SAP Business Site. We first included these roles that I exposed, so created a content channel for that, added this provider, S/4HANA provider, and then added those content roles into our site, and then assigned those roles to the user. And we saw that these are now showing up. And post that, we also show how we can create an application and consume that application within SAP LaunchPad service. Because it was deployed in the same BTP, it was quite easy to not only develop the application with literally no code, but also to consume this quite easily and make it available under a group, which we called Hello World. And this is the application which we created. I will pause here for some time and probably take you through some of the admin aspects of the site, explaining what's available and what all you can do. But you can also take this time to complete this exercise, have this application up and running up in your LaunchPad site, which we call SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition. Having said that, please take 5 minutes while I would just talk something out of the exercises, a bit about how you can administer the site and what are the different properties there. Okay, how can you configure the site, business site, and what are the different configuration options that you have? Now, we created the site, and these are the different options that you have within the site. Let's try to explore each of them. You can obviously rename, add a description to the site. It tells you also a full qualified URL that you can access the site with. Next is, if you have any site aliases, you can maintain them here, which is often useful. This gives you a little more information about who created, etc. Now, browser settings is important. Now, if you select this optimize site loading, this will be caching a lot of application at a cache central and makes it really faster. I would recommend this. But on the downside, you see that the cache requires us to also refresh the application as and when any changes available, etc. So, but by all means, in a environment where you need high performance, I would recommend this. Now, asynchronous model loading also increases the performance significantly and should be enabled. I will enable this for now. And this also allows you to do browser feature access, which is like your, this enables access to service workers and browser repos, browser DBs. Session timeout, you can configure the session timeout here. Always good to have a logout session timeout. And then you can play with this, but you can say how long should a session be in terms of idle session before it's timed out, and what is the alert timing before which before the session timeout that the user must be notified. Obviously, it also, if you enable the browser notification, this session timeout notification will also show in the browser notification saying that this particular session is about to get timed out. And if you want, you can go ahead and work further on it. Now, other things that you can control here is about the user capabilities, where you can say whether certain things are allowed or not allowed in this business site. One of them is whether personalization is allowed. Now, what kind of personalization? You can arrange groups and stuff together. I'll try and show the demo shortly after this. Whether you want to allow users to be able to select themes. I just showed you how I selected the theme. But if you do not add this, you can default a specific theme like SAP Horizon. and you can make that defaulted that everybody uses it. In many cases, if you have custom themes designed in your theme designer, which is also accessible via SAP LaunchPad Site, you can make sure that always the specific theme, uh, including all the corresponding branding, etc., are taken up, and people don't really change the theme that much, then you can disable this. Whether you want to allow language selection. Now, as I said before, languages are basically picked from the browser setting mostly, and also the fallback mechanism of the user language detection in the mechanism in SAP world, which is cascades down to the as in the selection down. And obviously you can add multiple languages here, which are the different languages that you allow for selection. You can add, you can add like Dutch or let's say German, and I don't know, many other such languages I can show you once we add this here. Now, the next one is what we will need in our next exercise, which is about SAP Mobile Start. If you enable this, then this particular site can be accessed from SAP Mobile Start application and hence accessed from a mobile device. Again, if you want to enable the enterprise search, which is basically allowing the search bar to not only select search within the app's names and catalogs and groups, but also go ahead and search content within the content providers who support enterprise search. You can also enable the recent and frequent activities, which basically arranges the sites that you more frequently access for the user and enables that. Now, group display mode is something where you can see all of them at once, but if you disable them, then you will only see one group at a time and not all of them at once. Many use cases might require that. Again, whether you want to enable key user adaptation, which is basically a Fiori feature, how you can modify the UI of an HTML application at runtime. You can enable that, and this would be available for who is capable of doing user adaptation, basically key users who are assigned key users in the system. SAP Companion, if you enable this, you would be able to see the in-app help that is available. And if you already implemented in-app help, it's also a good idea to enable this. Often I just open this so that I can show that as well. Now again, here, display. In display, you have different options which are about how the view should be. I think I touched upon it briefly that there could be different ways in which you manage the categorization and the cataloging of applications. It's groups, as we just saw, which is the default. There's also another option to have this categorized and cataloged as pages and spaces within, which basically creates a hierarchy of pages and then submenu as pages, spaces, and all the application belonging to that space comes up within that. Now, tile sizes, you can select to have a responsive, larger tiles or smaller size tiles. You can play with these settings and see how it looks. And display on screen, whether you want to have a search in help bar, whether you want to have hide group selection, etc., and whether you want to show notification, I'll enable this to show you the icon then. And here it says, where should this be? The app finder, edit homepage, and settings. Ideally, this is already available in the avatar menu, the user menu, but you can always add that into the shell header, which comes as a button on top. Having done this, I would save this to show you what exactly the difference is. And let's just reload this application. Yeah, I'm reloading this application. And now, first of all, let's come from the back. So all these buttons now show up in the shell bar and not really inside the avatar menu. So this is much smaller now. Again, I told you that the theme manager is part of this. So if you're an admin, you would have access to the theme manager, which could be used to create a branded theme, and then you can enable that. But as a user, obviously, I can select my theme, provided it is enabled for selection in the previous in the screen, we saw that. So in the appearance, we can select something like, I don't know, I would select maybe SAP Evening Horizon, which is the darker more of SAP Horizon. And here we selected the theme, and the users are enabled to select such themes or change themes on their own. So this option is available here. And you also have the search bar and search capability here. That's all from the exercises. We saw different exercises in today's hands-on. We set up the LaunchPad service in our trial account. Obviously, we talked about how the LaunchPad service is being renamed as SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition, and the names will reflect in the BTP cockpit and other UIs eventually from January 2023. We saw how we can create a tile with corresponding from a URL, basically allowing an application being embedded within LaunchPad site using an URL. And then how can we add this tile into your LaunchPad site? Then we went on to see how you can federate content from S4. This was a demo. This was not a hands-on exercise, but you had a glimpse of how you enable the S4HANA system for access via exposure of content, where you did certain administrative activities, and then you went on to enable the CDM3 service and expose the corresponding roles that you want to expose in the SAP Cloud Connector. We define which sub-account shall access this particular S4HANA system, and then we define the corresponding system details as to what are the corresponding system details that you want to access. So we define both the BTP sub-account, the content that it would really connect to, and which path, etc. We added the resources to it. Once we did that, we went on to include this roles via creating destinations for design time and runtime. Design time destinations, basically picking what's being shared, what's being exposed, and showing and adding those tiles to it. That's something you use via the DT destination, and for runtime destination is what is used to load the application. And yep, so based on this, we went on to create a content provider within our site manager and added those roles that were exposed from S4HANA system into the site, and then added the users to the corresponding role. In my case, I would added myself into all the roles so that we can see them. We saw all the applications showing here, and you can then access the corresponding application via the content exposure. For some reason, this is not working anymore. But we then went on to create an application to see how we can consume applications deployed into the same BTP sub-account. And what we did is we went on to Business Application Studio. We created a new Fiori application based on the template, and we also created the corresponding deployable archive, artifacts, information around that, and what would be the Launchpad tile details, the titles, etc. What semantic object and action should it have? When we do that and we deploy it, the corresponding managed app router generates a corresponding route, and also when you refresh this content from the HTML5 repo provider, it adds that tile into your content. Obviously, you have to go into my content and add it to your content inside your site editor, which we did here. So once again, we went to Content Explorer, we went to this, and obviously we added this. Now it is already added, so it is checked. And once we did that, the next steps were to add this particular application to a role who all can access this. I added it to everyone so that everyone can access this, but it depends on the use case. And in many cases, it would probably be assignable to a specific role where only specific users have access to. Then we also added it to a corresponding group because we wanted to show it inside. We actually created a Hello World group and then added this Hello World application inside that. So that's what it is. Once we did that, the corresponding Hello World application or group showed up with the application here. you have to select the org, and before that, we have to select the API endpoint, which is basically you can collect from here, from your account, sub-account. Here you will see an API endpoint link. This is API endpoint, and you give your credentials so you can log in to the Cloud Foundry. And then you select the corresponding sub-accounts that are there. So obviously the org IDs, if you have only one trial account inside, you would see this in the drop-down list, or you will probably see multiple of them if you have more such sub-accounts where you have access to the user which logs in to the deploy in the deploy section. And then you can select the corresponding org ID and the corresponding space where you want to deploy this application, and the corresponding mtar would be deployed based on this description. Okay, we're at the end of the session. It's 7 minutes. If you have any specific questions that you want to ask still, we are around for the next 7 minutes till the end of the session. I hope you have been able to understand and follow the exercises. If not, you can always do this later using your own trial account or an access any sub-account that you have access to. And hopefully all the exercises are, so you have access to this GitHub repo. This will already be there for you to access later as well to continue and confirm and do this exercise. The recording, as I'm told, would be available in a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks after the session. And you should also be able to go through the recording and follow along during the revisit. Okay. Now that we are done, if there are any questions, maybe I'll ask my colleagues who are moderating if there are any questions. Well, the possible issues that can cause the deployment to fail is, one is you would not have selected the right org and space, or if this particular part did not show up. But if you try again, it should ask you. Once you set this up, it should stay as in that particular workspace as long as you're using that workspace, and does not ask you again and again. Apart from that, I think I want to stress upon the fact that post this session, you can also ask questions in our community or ask questions for support via the issues tab if you have a specific issue with this exercise or comments thereon. Okay, I think we are done. We have 4 minutes left. We will continue to monitor the question and answer tab, but for now, I would sign off, and this is the end of the hands-on, which is called a beginning to end workshop on configuring SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition, which is also known at this point of time as SAP BTP SAP LaunchPad service. And I think we touched upon brief. I hope you enjoyed the session and learn how to configure and utilize SAP Build Work Zone Standard Edition, and also have interest. If you have interest, you can access other TechEd sessions, which will be around the topic of SAP Build, SAP Build Work Zone, both standard and advanced edition, and any other topic that is covered on the TechEd. So with this, I would sign off.